Bill is kind of sick today. So if there is coughing, give us a bit of slack. Bill's very ill, just to let everyone know.
Thank you, Edgar.
Just to give heads up. Anyhow, do you want to continue with your going on about how everyone loves Bill? Okay, so there's a thing I wanted to run by you, Bill, that I couldn't quite ham-fist into any of our well-established segments. I'm just going to throw it at the top of the show.
Okay.
And that is memes, right? Yeah, like, I've been noticing an uptake in memes on the internet recently, and it has occurred to me that a certain type of meme is like conlanging gold. And it's the meme that is kind of like that feeling when. And you know, where there's some like funny thing that we're all meant to be like, oh, I get that feeling, blah, blah, blah. And
yeah,
it's like conlanging gold, because the whole like industry of these memes is that there is no word for this phenomenon. And so I've been like looking through all of these, and with like in one afternoon, I think I picked up like, I don't know, maybe somewhere around 10-ish ideas for new words in other languages. So
that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool idea. Like, you know, the whole thing about, you know, when you're on public transport and you're really bored, but suddenly you remember a really embarrassing moment from your childhood, and it sends shivers up your spine. Like, that deserves a whole word.
I'm going to be honest. That's not a specifically public transport related phenomenon in my mind.
Oh, I only ever get it on buses. Maybe buses are a particular boring period for me, and my brain's just like going through the vaults trying to look for something interesting, and goes, oh yeah, do you remember that one time you did this terrible thing? And you're like, oh god, brain, stop. But there's no word for that, and like memes as conlanging fodder, I think is a really cool idea. So I just wanted to bring it up and put it on the podcast. And I wonder, is this a new revelation, or has anyone else stumbled across this? Surely someone would have been like, would have thought exactly like me, you know?
I have never heard of anyone doing this from a kind of conlanging point of view. But there is a book by Douglas Adams, you know, who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and all that. A guy called Douglas Adams and another guy called John Lloyd. They wrote a book called The Meaning of Liff.
The Meaning of Liff?
Yes, Liff.
Okay.
And it's it's been a while since I read it, but it took place names and came up with definitions for what they could mean, and they were all real things. And I think part of the justification was they've got all these, you know, words which are place names sitting around just being used as place names, not actually doing any heavy lifting in the language. And then we've got all these concepts that we don't have words for, so why not use the place names for these concepts? And one of them was like, you know, when you find like the kind of white gunge inside a fork when it's only kind of been cursorily washed, it hasn't been properly washed. What's that white gunge called? There isn't really a name for that specific thing, so we found an unpleasant sounding place name somewhere, and he paired the two concepts.
Huh.
Yeah.
Oh, so this gunge could just literally be called Dublin, and that's the extent of the thought there. Just marry unnamed concepts with place names, and that's it.
Yes.
Huh.
But like they're all like, it's really funny.
That's really interesting. All I really know about Douglas Adams is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I've never heard of anything else he's done.
He wrote that, and he wrote 2 books about a holistic detective called Dirk Gently. That they're very good. It was adapted into a TV show last year on Netflix, and I watched the first few episodes, and I thought it was really, really poorly cast and poorly conceived, but I might give it another try.
What do you think of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the film?
I haven't seen it.
Okay, all right, because that one is a weird one for me. I don't entirely like it, and possibly because it's so English. Remember we talked about my dislike of the English aesthetic. It's very English, and I think in my head when I read the book, it was less English.
Right.
So when it translated into movie form, it was kind of like, oh, this is a bit, I don't really dig it. But I like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's really cool. Anyhow, memes. Memes as conlanging inspiration. Try it out, listeners. There are some pretty hilarious things you can come to, and it's really fun. So the second point I need to bring up before we kind of do follow up proper. This is kind of a follow up point, but is the TEDx talk. We were meant to talk about the TEDx talk last month, the big reveal that it is now on YouTube, and I utterly forgot. And in editing, and in editing the podcast, I was like, "Why is this podcast only like an hour and a half long? Like we had more than enough to talk about." And then I was like, "Oh yeah, you left out the big like elephant in the room, the TED talk." So top of the show in this one. My TEDx talk is now up on the TEDx YouTube channel. I'll leave links in the show notes for people who want to go check it out. I'm pretty sure most people in Artifexian though would have already seen it, because I posted it on the Worldbuilding subreddit and it like skyrocketed to the top of the subreddit. Like thousands of upvotes. So right now, that video is now in the most upvoted posts of all time on the Worldbuilding subreddit, which is...
Oh, no way.
Yeah, which is phenomenal. Like, it's particularly, from like a business sense, it's really good for me because whenever I find a new subreddit, I frequently just go to all time, sort by top, just to get a feel of what the community, like, on a global level likes. And the fact that I have a post in there is really, really, really cool. And I just want to thank the internet for all of that. So if you have not watched the TEDx talk, go check it out. Links in the doobly-doo. If you have and you upvoted, thank you so much. This is such an achievement. I'm so happy. And I always wondered what it would feel like for those internet celebrities that got the thousands of upvotes. And surprisingly, it feels rather normal. It's just kind of like, oh yeah, it's like any other post. You know the thing where it's kind of like, when you're a kid, you're kind of like, I wonder what it's going to be like to have like thousands of euro. And then you grow up and you're an adult and you're kind of like, oh yeah, this is kind of like standard.
Oh, well, that's rent.
Yeah, exactly. That is rent. Like, oh, that may get me a computer. Whereas a kid, you're kind of like, oh my God, it's like this mystical land of just rich people, those people with thousands. So it was a very weird like feeling, experiencing all those upvotes. But anyhow, TEDx talk, YouTube, and thank you to Artifexian and the Worldbuilding subreddit. Yeah?
Yeah, thanks very much.
Okay, so follow proper.
Yeah, there's a few things I want to bring up. I've got an email from Seth Warburton, who's doing a project, I think in school, about the plausibility of life existing in liquid methane or liquid ammonia, as opposed to being based around water and carbon, as far as I can figure out. As opposed to using methane or ammonia as a solvent instead of using water as a solvent. And the question is, have we put any thought into what life that uses these would look like? How might it be vastly different to life on Earth? That's so far beyond my knowledge. It's a fantastic question, and it's a fantastic concept, and one that we could definitely run with.
Okay, so I have points here.
Yeah.
First point, this guy's in school and he's doing a project like this. This is crazy. This seems like degree level stuff, like to be thinking about these things.
I think so. He's described it as an extended project qualification, which is a qualification you can do alongside A-levels in England. So yeah, I guess he's in his final years of school in England.
Well played, Seth. Well played. That's the first point. Second point is that there is a good summary of what would happen if life used methane and ammonia as a solvent in the Worldbuilding book that I often plug, the Writer's Guide to Constructing Star Systems. I'll leave links in the show notes. Buy that book, Seth. It's really, really, really good, and it goes through exactly what you want. TLDR, I can't remember all the details, but the sort of upshot of all of this is that if life were to emerge with these solvents, it's because of the environmental constraints that all of this implies. You're never really going to get any sort of technologically advanced civilization. It's always going to be like Stone Age level and worse, because things like you can't burn stuff in that environment and all this sort of things. It's so much more detailed in the book. Buy the book. Again, links in the show notes, but that's the standout point I remember from that book, just being like, oh yeah, carbon-based life forms can have computers. Everything else, probably not.
So you could have intelligent life. You could have like life as intelligent as humans. They just wouldn't be able to develop as much technology.
Okay, so I think the wording he uses in the book is very kind of iffy. Like, if intelligent life were to arise, I don't think, I'd have to read it again, I don't think he makes any conclusions that, yes, that is entirely plausible for intelligent life to arise in these scenarios. They're quite speculative as is. So
Yeah.
I don't want to say, I don't want to put on the podcast being like, life can almost certainly evolve in a ammonia solvent environment, because we don't know. But yes, if intelligent life were to arise, the limitations of the environment will not see them go on to develop to be a technologically advanced civilization.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Anything else?
The next one was we got an email from Patrick Hildeman.
Patrick Hildeman.
Yes. Who is from Sweden.
Hey!
And he wanted to tell us about various kinds of cultural costumes, I think. The folk costumes of Sweden. And that these costumes people wear, kind of traditional wear, contain a lot of information about the person wearing them. So you can tell where they're from, like what province or possibly what specific town they're from, whether they're married, what social status they have, and things like that. And he sent us a link, or he sent us an image with some examples of these costumes, which I guess we could throw in the show notes or something if anyone else is interested in it.
Cool.
And yeah, that's really cool, and that's something I think that people should think about when developing their con worlds and then developing their cultures within their settings. It's quite fertile, and it's something that you can really think a lot about and get a lot out of. I think we do have that ourselves in broader Western culture.
Do we?
Not maybe to the same extent and not conveying the same information, but the way people dress does tell a lot about them in a lot of ways.
Oh, okay, yeah, but I feel like the Swedish example here is that it explicitly does so, whereas in the Western world say, we'll use Ireland for example, it's not explicit. It just so happens that, say, I don't know, black hoodies and new rocks imply that a person is, in the alternative group at school or whatever, but that's not the explicit intended purpose of those clothes, but maybe it is. I don't know.
I see why it feels like there's a difference, but I think, because we're going to be blind to a lot of how we construct our own culture anyway, because it's an unconscious thing. So it is different, but I don't know that it's terribly different.
No, I agree with you. Not terribly different, but I feel like it is different. I feel like if a person in Sweden...
Well, yeah, it's encoding different information.
Yeah, it is encoding different information. And also, I think it would be... okay, the analogy I think of here is that if a person in Sweden were to learn about this clothing, they would learn in textbooks in school explicitly stated, this item of clothing is used to show that you're a smith or whatever. Whereas we're not going to learn about clothing in school. We're not going to learn the same thing about our clothing in school. Do you know what I mean?
I would be surprised if that was the case, that you'd explicitly learn it in that way.
Really? But you learn explicit stuff about folklore in Irish schools. It's part of the culture.
Yeah.
You learn about your culture. And if that's its explicit role, you will learn about that role, whereas you're not going to learn about that with other forms of clothing, because that's a secondary purpose. The main purpose is to cover yourself. But the fact that it makes you black hoodies and new rocks puts you in with the alternative group is a secondary meaning.
The primary focus of the folk costumes is also to cover yourself.
Yeah, no, that yeah. The minute I said that, I was like, "Oh God, Edgar, he's gonna mention that." Of course, all clothes.
I know. Anyway, there's a whole thing there, and I think that's a thing to be aware of if you're talking about clothes within your world building. That usually they serve a social function as well. They tend to portray some kind of information, whether that's conscious or unconscious. There is other information encoded there. If you're, making a statement that you're part of this social grouping, however it's grouped, or it's where you're from, or what football team you support, or whatever. There's a lot of associated things in there, and it's rarely just as simple as this is clothing for my body.
Yep, I agree with that. Yeah.
And we've got one more email from Ethan Price, and this is a bit of a throwback to episode 3.
Oh God, that's a long time ago.
A long time ago, where we challenged listeners to come up with non-verbal, non-written language systems, which I admit was a pretty tall order.
Yeah, it was.
And I think we got 1 or 2 at the time, but this is an absolutely brilliant one. I'll just read out quickly what he's written. Do you all have memories of when you were a little kid and you were fascinated by the sounds you made when you slapped something? I remember being about 5 or 6 and being absolutely enraptured by the differences in sound when I slapped my stomach with different hand shapes or slapped different parts of my body. Hypothetically, this could be turned into a fully functional language with a maximum of 2, or more if the society is alien and has multiple sets of arms, a maximum of 2 sounds at the same time. A possible syllabic structure could be a single fluid motion. Say if you hit your calf, thigh and torso all with one motion, if the leg is raised, or a single sound, or so on. Now that's an absolutely brilliant idea. I really, really like this, that you've got, I suppose, sonic body language, audio body language, auditory body language. I don't know how to audiated, maybe was the right word here. But you're using like corporeal sounds to communicate. And yeah, I'm really fascinated by this. What I like about it is it's still audio, so it still relies on the sense of hearing, but it was a really neat kind of whole. I didn't say a non-sonic language system, I said non-verbal, and so it's come up with this. And also, I like the idea that you could have simultaneity in the language. Like if you use both hands at the same time doing different things, then those meanings can modify each other, and they happen at the same time, which is impossible in spoken language, but is a feature of sign languages.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the only difficulty I see here is that I imagine different people's bodies would make very different kinds of sounds, and so the gradation of someone hitting the center of the stomach and say their right flank would be, those two sounds would be less different to each other than that same person hitting the center of their stomach and someone else hitting the center of their stomach, perhaps. Different people's bodies would make different sounds, and that I'd imagine that would make it hard to have kind of a cohesive language between different speakers, or slappers, I guess would be the correct term in this case. But yeah, no, I just thought that was a really fresh and a really innovative idea. So nicely done, Ethan.
This is a really good idea, and I like it, right? But just to play devil's advocate, is this perhaps... It strikes me like this is not really an auditory language. Just for the points you raised there about like different parts of the body may not be so different. And you may not be able to distinguish like what the difference in sound between a calf being hit and a thigh being hit may not be all that great. So it strikes me like this is a visual language. Like when you see someone sitting there hitting their calf and their thigh, you use that to gain the information. Like it strikes me like the sonic element is probably going to fail. Like, and also you're not going to be able to use that sonic element over distances, because body parts don't make that loud a noise. But visually you can still see a person a mile off. I reckon this is probably primarily a visual language, and secondarily, it comes with sound.
So you see this as a sort of a full body sign language.
Yeah, almost. And it just kind of happens to make sound.
I see what you're saying, but Ethan's proposal here is entirely based around the sounds that are made. That's the fundamental thrust of the suggestion.
Yeah. Yeah, no, like, it would work. I think it would work well in close quarters. I would have reservations about how well this language would work at a distance. But, in that being said, languages aren't perfect.
Like, lots of languages don't work at distance. I mean, like, sign languages probably have a limited visual range that they can work in.
Mm-hmm, exactly, yeah. But overall, that is a cool idea.
Isn't it?
And props to the person for listening to... Props to... Name? What's the name again?
Ethan.
Props to Ethan as well for listening to episode 3. I wonder, is Ethan a new viewer?
Only found about Artifexian a few weeks ago from our Worldbuilding. I wonder, is that because of the TED Talk? And only found out about the podcast yesterday.
Oh, welcome on board the good ship Artifexian, Ethan. No, but that's a seriously cool suggestion. Very, very, very cool. Yeah, cool, awesome. Anything else in the mailbag?
That's everything in the mail.
Okay, so we do some Reddit.
Let's do some Reddit.
I have a few things to bring up from the Reddit before we get on to Nlamo feedback. The first one, just 2 small points. The first one is someone brought up the question about what does crack mean? And that is crack in the non-narcotic, fully Irish sense of the word. And this person proposed a meaning of crack on the subreddit. And I just wanted to just bring it up with you, Bill. What do you think crack is?
I gave a lengthy answer to this on the subreddit, Edgar.
You see, it does require a lengthy answer, but I'd like to hear it on air because I think it's quite cool.
It's good-natured fun, such as that you might have, in the pub. But it's also more generally fun with friends it could take place anywhere. Anything enjoyable and lighthearted could be called crack, I think, is the fundamental idea here.
Yeah.
As I said, you might describe Pokemon Go as good crack because it's fun and you go around and you get out of the house and it's enjoyable and it's nothing too serious or heavy.
You see, now that seems like a really neat way of summarizing it, right? And it always blows my mind that people find it so amazing that we use this term crack to describe, just the good times, having the crack, so to speak. But like, do any other English-speaking countries not have the equivalent? Is there not an American equivalent for crack? Like, how do Americans define that feeling when you're with a load of friends and you're just hanging out and just having meaningless fun playing Pokemon Go or something? Is there no word for this?
Do you want to hear something heterodox and iconoclastic, Edgar? That might get me in trouble with a lot of Irish people.
Oh, okay. I don't know what those words mean, but the second part there about getting in trouble with Irish people is really good. You plow straight into this, Bill.
It's an English word.
No way.
Yeah. It's only been used in Ireland for, I think, since like the 50s.
Now,
it's quite recently imported into Ireland.
Wait, hold on. Now, we're talking about crack. How are we spelling crack here?
Well, this is the other thing. It was spelt C-R-A-C-K in, I think it was used in like Northern England. And it had not exactly the same meaning, but I think it had kind of fun and also gossip. Yeah, I mean, it's all on like online dictionaries and stuff if you look it up. It was spelled C-R-A-C-K. And then in Ireland, it's spelled C-R-A-I-C, which is a sort of an affected Hibernism, or an affected Gaelicization. But I actually defend that because it makes it clear when you're using it in written language that you mean this Irish kind of usage of it, that it means fun and lighthearted enjoyment, as opposed to a fissure in something.
So it came from England. Okay.
Yeah.
Question still stands though. Is there an American equivalent? I
don't know.
I want to know from the subreddit. Is there an American equivalent? Because all the words I can think of to describe that feeling that aren't crack, I don't think Americans would say this. Like I would use banter.
Yeah.
As well.
Banter's not exactly the same.
No, it's not exactly the same, but it's as close as possible I can get. Just thinking on the fly here. But
Yeah.
I can't see Americans, saying, "Oh, I hung around with loads of friends and it was really great banter." That doesn't strike me like they would use it. So I wonder, what do Americans use?
Good times.
Good times. How very imaginative. Crack is a glorious word. I love it. It's at least it's my favorite thing about being Irish. The fact that we have that word. It's just so wonderful, and it just sums up such great emotion. It's just brilliant, and the fact that it also sounds like crack is hilarious. And I love the mix-ups you get with people when you're like, "Oh, that was good crack," and they're like, "What?" And you're like, no, AIC, it's okay. Anyhow, the meaning of crack. That was one thing I want to bring up. The other thing I wanted to bring up is just really, really quickly, because this could go down a rabbit hole really fast. The albedo thing. I promise this will be the last we ever hear of albedo. Okay, just stick with me, Artifexian.
I have no complaints.
You what?
I have no complaints.
You've no, well, that's good. The last show I talked about how if the angle of incidence is low, the reflectivity is high, or the amount of reflected light is more. And this blew my mind. And one Redditor, a u/link, I can't read it, the text is
Link,
too small.
Eagle, and Zen.
That's it. The text is too small in front of me. Pointed out that this is due to a thing called the Fresnel effect. And the Fresnel effect is essentially saying that the lower angle of incidence, the higher the reflected light. This person linked to a Blender tutorial. And for those who don't know, Blender is this piece of software that you can use to composite 3D images and animations. It's like a step up from After Effects in terms of super pro sort of endeavors. And I want to thank this Redditor.
It's 3D modeling, isn't it?
It's 3D modeling. Yeah, it's 3D modeling. Yeah. I want to thank this Redditor because they brought me down a YouTube rabbit hole, and I watched so many Blender tutorials because of them. Nothing to do with albedo or reflectivity. I just watched lots of Blender tutorials, and I really want to download Blender, and I really want to get into this. So a little project I have in the back burner is to learn how to do 3D modeling. And if I can incorporate proper 3D animations into a future video sometime, that would be amazing. But it seems like it's a really weird world to get into if you come from 2D motion graphics. But anyhow, thank you to that Redditor, and thank you for finally putting to rest this albedo thing and why this happens. So yeah, those are my 2 points. Do you have anything to retort? And if not, do you want to crack on with Nlamo?
Well, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about the feedback for Nlamo.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I got a great response to what I wrote for the last episode about warfare in Nlamo, and I got exactly the kind of responses that I was hoping for. My intentions were pretty much received as I'd hoped. That some of the parallels that I had intended, between Tensha and the story of Shaka were clear, but it wasn't seen as a direct parallel. It wasn't just like a total copy of his story. Coolmare, the user Coolmare, picked up on how King Tensha is spelt with an ogonek, the little tail below the E, to indicate nasalization, when it's written down by Nlami characters. But the envoy, who's from another land, just spells it Tensha, that they don't get the subtleties of the nasalization and the pronunciation, and thus they spell it slightly differently.
Which
I was very happy by. I was kind of worried that people would think I had retconned it or made a mistake, or that they wouldn't pair the two names together. But apparently my intentions are clear, so that's really good.
That's amazing. I completely missed that. That's amazing. Well done to you and the Redditor. That's class.
A few other questions. What was the situation of cavalry in Nlamo? Which is something I didn't mention. It's not really very common, is the short answer. There's some places would use it to a certain extent, but horses aren't particularly widespread in the region. So it's used.
It's all multi-tusked elephants.
No, they don't really use war elephants much.
Oh, the Lord of the Rings reference? No one. Okay.
Yeah. The Oliphants.
The Oliphants, exactly.
So it's probably used on a small scale by certain groups, but it's not widespread. It's not a significant tactic.
Okay.
There's one or two others.
Is this deliberate because of the whole like you're drawing influences from like sub-Saharan Africa, or is just you're not bothered about the horses?
I hadn't put that much thought into it, to be honest. So I guess I hadn't conceived of them as being a significant element of the area.
Okay, cool.
Someone, user Fizz6, said that what I proposed, and especially with the parallels I made to kind of line versus column infantry in the Napoleonic era, would make a lot more sense with our artillery or firearms, and arrows wouldn't necessarily be the most effective way of achieving the desired impact on the army, the enemy army, and that's a perfectly valid criticism. I think I can just about get away with it, given the circumstances of what I described, and I'm not using this as like a long-term kind of game-breaking tactic. It's just it worked for the duration of a number of campaigns over a short period of time against diverse enemies, rather than being something that, locked down an entire continent for 25 years.
Right, okay, you're not giving this tactic like almost borderline magical powers to solve everything in terms of story.
No, absolutely not. It's not like this is the one thing that, makes him win every battle. It's not the only tactic that Tesha used. He didn't use it all of the time. It didn't work all of the time, but it was, one of the things that made him ascendant and made him victorious against the normal warfare of the period.
And to be fair, you just wanted to talk about Napoleon, which is perfectly fine.
That's not entirely accurate. It was one source of inspiration.
It's also not entirely inaccurate.
No, not entirely inaccurate. It's somewhat inaccurate. And as I said, Napoleon didn't invent that. It was just, it was the way the French fought at the time. He just used it a lot. He's the most significant proponent of it. I would say.
Adorable side note, I just want to put in here really quickly. It was Napoleon's birthday recently, was it? Was that the thing you shared?
Yesterday, from the day of recording. It's the 15th of August. It was his 248th birthday.
So, adorable side note here, Bill was on social media highlighting and celebrating this, and it was very, very nice to see. Your man, Napoleon.
And Edgar decided to take, because I put up a picture on Facebook of the famous portrait of Napoleon in his study at Tuileries. You'd recognize it if you saw it, I suspect. It's one of the famous ones of him. He's not wearing a hat, and he's kind of standing by a chair with his hand inside his jacket, as he often did.
Did.
Yeah, in most of his portraits, that's how or in a lot of his portraits, that's how he's portrayed, with his hand in his jacket.
Okay, it just seemed like you were so pally with Napoleon there. I know everything about Napoleon. He often had his right hand in his pocket. It's like, what?
No, it was like in the front of his jacket, like in between the buttons, closing up the front of his jacket.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, Bill.
Yeah, come on, Edgar. Anyway, Edgar downloaded this portrait and photoshopped my face onto Napoleon.
I would never engage in illegal downloading of portraits of Napoleon and altering them beyond their original intent. I would never do such a thing.
There's nothing illegal about that,
Edgar. Yeah, that was fun. I just wish that the image of Napoleon you had was more high res. There was a lot of pixel fighting to get your face onto Napoleon's face. So many times Photoshop was like, cannot merge. I'm like, and I can't write to you and be like, hey, Bill, do you want to supply a slightly higher res image of Napoleon? And I wasn't bothered getting
you could
my
have
own.
just Googled, like reverse Google image searched that portrait and found what the portrait was and gotten a higher res version of it.
But Bill, I was meant to be making a video at this time, right? So I wasn't going to dedicate any more time than necessary to do this.
That's no excuse for second-rate tomfoolery.
So good.
I've got one more thing to say about Nlamo.
Yes, sorry, tangent, go Nlamo.
which I meant to actually include in either what I wrote last month or what I spoke about in last month. It has been said that Handwavia, and where the setting Nlamo is based in, is magical and a fantastic. It has been said that Handwavia, the setting that Nlamo is based in, is essentially a fantasy setting, or a setting with fantastical elements, and magic is part of it. And I wanted to say that magic was not used on the battlefields of Nlamo. They didn't have like battle wizards or battle mages or anything like that would be, maybe a sort of an analog to things like artillery and firearms. That's not a feature of Nlamo warfare.
Hang on, that calls into doubt the piece you've written this month.
No, it doesn't.
Oh, there's going to be something to talk about. Okay, so that's a really nice segue into the main topic. But before we do that, could I just drop a really quick mention, and then we'll go straight into the main topic, and I need to try and figure out what's going on now. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Really quickly, I've discovered a new podcast called Myths and Legends. Links in the show notes. I don't particularly like this podcast. It's just not for me. The aesthetic doesn't work for me, but it is going to be great world building fodder for someone listening here. Essentially, it's one guy talking through various myths and legends. So you don't need to read all the terribly worded, archaic nonsense that it comes from. So he's like, the first few episodes he deals with Arthurian legends, and the second thing is about Aladdin. Turns out Aladdin, not from the Middle East. Aladdin was actually from China.
The character or the story?
The character and the story. I might get that wrong, but definitely one of those two things. And also the lamp or whatever. It wasn't a lamp; it was a ring, which is also interesting. So I think that's a great place for people to get their world building fix. Myths and Legends podcast. Go check it out. That said, shall we move into? Sorry, go on.
I had in my head that Aladdin was an Iranian story about a Chinese character who travels to the Middle East. So it's kind of it's kind of in between, and he goes from further east to further west. I don't know where I got that. It was just kind of.
That may well be the case. One of the reasons why I don't like this podcast is because there's something about the rhythm in which the information is delivered that I find it hard to retain the information. So it may well be the case that this was said, but I also listen to podcasts while I'm doing other stuff, so I'm not 100% attentive. But the take-home point I took from just having that episode waft over me was that there was some component of Chinese stuff going on, which I didn't know about because I'm only really familiar with the Aladdin myth through Disney.
Yeah.
So anyhow, good world building fodder for people. They really should check it out. As always, Bill has written a piece of prose about Nlamo. And would you be able to give a TLDR of what you've written so we can get quickly to this point about not using magic on the battlefield? Because the last paragraph you have written of this piece implies to me that they do use magic in one form or another on the battlefield, and I don't know what's going on now. You've undermined my entire worldview, Bill. I need this cleared up.
So as I implied last episode, and a few people seemed to be eager to get to this, what I've written this month is the envoy arriving at Tenshah's capital and encountering the king and his court. Mm-hmm. and it's go read it if you haven't read it. But it's just a brief description of the capital, Zahamo, and what the people who are members of the court and the embassy meeting with the king and his advisors. And they have a great feast to welcome the embassy. And after the feast, as the envoy is returning to his quarters, he is set upon by the king's chief advisor and companion, the judge and priest Matway. And Matway has seen into the envoy and understands their true purpose in Nlamo, and he scares he frightens the envoy and tells him that terrible things will happen if they proceed with their invasion and their trickery. And I guess what you're talking about here is in the last paragraph. The envoy is writing. I'll read the last paragraph out.
Yeah.
My spirit was shaken by this meeting. I momentarily believed that I must advise against the invasion of this country. Such was the shock of Matway's actions and the gravity of his words. Our expedition must be prepared for spirited resistance and bitter conflict, as I have previously written. But furthermore, we must prepare for the use of magics and crafts unknown in our own lands. The Nlami will not be conquered easily.
Right, does that not imply that they will use magics and crafts if the conquerors try and conquer?
Yeah, but that's not the same thing as using battle mages.
Okay, now how are we defining like magic in warfare here? If we're defining as battle mages, then no, I don't agree. But surely it implies like magical espionage, which is a military tactic, isn't it?
Stuff like that. But what I was saying earlier, I was clarifying that they don't use it in a way that would be analogous to artillery or firearms. It's not like, mass destruction walls of fire.
Okay. So yeah, it's a lot more subtle use of magic, basically.
Yes, the magic would be more subtle than, or this is what the envoy is writing.
This is what the envoy believes.
Yes.
So whether or not they use magic at all is who knows. But the envoy is scared enough.
Well, I know.
Well, that's right. You know. Okay, so to back up, now that point's cleared, to back up a little bit, you've been watching Game of Thrones recently? Bit of Game of Thrones going on here, no?
I have not been watching Game of Thrones recently.
This reminded me of Martin's writing, and it reminded me of your one, the I Love the Lord of Light one in Game of Thrones. What's her name? Melisandre. Yeah, Melisandre. It strikes me like the magic we see in this piece of prose is very Melisandre-like. Any inspiration there? No?
Not consciously.
Okay, because let me read out a bit here that reminds me exactly of Melisandre. It goes, the priest opened his mouth as wide as a mouth can open, and then further, and the shadow inside his gaping jaw seemed to grow and overpower all the senses I possessed. That seems. Do you remember that scene in Game of Thrones where Melisandre births a shadow?
Yes.
It's very reminiscent of that.
That was messed up.
That was messed up. This is less messed up. But it was very reminiscent of that. And that's not a bad thing. Like, I actually got very vivid imagery when I read that. So I thought it was really cool.
Cool.
And the second thing that reminded me of Game of Thrones is you were dancing around food pornography, which I loved. The way Martin does in his books. You wrote, a number of cattle were freshly slaughtered in honor of our embassy and served alongside spice soups, loaves of boiled grains, stews of many vegetables, and the meat of an elephant. And it was really close to just like a few more items on that menu, and we would have had like George R. R. Martin style food pornography. And I was like, yes, go Bill.
I never noticed that when I read A Song of Ice and Fire. Maybe it's just because I like food, so it just didn't really bother me.
I mean, I noticed it because I like food. Like, it doesn't bother me. I think it's great. Like, he would go on. But, like, have you reread them at all recently?
No.
Okay, it might be worth rereading them because those paragraphs where he's going on about what's on the tables at banquets, they go on for a while. Like his lists are long and extensive. So anyhow, can I talk to you a little bit about magic?
Yes.
Specifically magic here. Now I realize the answer to all these questions are going to be, we don't know. You'd have to wait until something else is written. But I'm going to try and
I can talk a little bit more freely about Handwavia than I will about Janspar. So
that's true.
So at least it's this setting, not the other.
So what sort of magic happens here, and what are we not going to see happen? Like we're not. You've made it clear that we're not going to see battle mages firing.
Yeah.
Big like flame missiles at everyone. So what are we talking?
I'm kind of going for something a little subtler. I'm not trying to make it like Dungeons and Dragons, where wizards can shoot off spells. If you look at a lot of things, like if you look at Lord of the Rings, a lot of as I recall, a lot of the magic of Gandalf is quite subtle. He does sort of small things in the background, and it's like little tricks, and like little things become easier for other people. And it's very rare that he actually does like big, grand magic. I suppose when he fights the Balrog, there's some of that. And when he turns up as Gandalf the White, and it's a bit apparition. And when he charges into Helm's Deep. But a lot of what he does that is magical is kind of on a smaller scale, but has a big influence. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And I in a lot of ways, I find that more interesting to write about than clearly indicating all of the powers and making them like everything is large and grand and clearly understood. If magic is a little bit more mysterious and a little bit more occult or a little bit more esoteric, then that can be a lot more fun in certain ways. And I guess I'm trying to tap into an understanding of magic, a historical understanding of magic, that was something that people didn't really understand, and that happened in the darkness and away from normal vision. And it was tied up with, in a lot of places it was tied up with poison. For example, in the Bible, apparently terms could be translated either as witch or as poisoner, because if you think about it, they're not hugely different concepts if you don't know anything about poison.
Mm-hmm.
And in some places it's tied up with medicine.
Yeah. So,
and if you don't have a clear delineation of the concepts in your mind, then magic can be a lot of things that would otherwise be mundane. And that's a lot more interesting to me than having, we all understand, all of this real materialistic reality and existence, and then there's this like flashy supernatural magic on top of it. I mean, that absolutely 100% has its place. But for what I'm doing with Nlamo, this kind of subtler, slightly more ambiguous approach is a little more interesting to me.
I fully agree. I think that's a good call. Have I ever talked to you about the fan rumor that the Force doesn't actually exist in the Star Wars universe?
I think you've mentioned it. I'm not that familiar with it, though.
I think we've mentioned it on the podcast, but it reminds me of that, where you have this like magic system, and if you look at it a certain way, it can just be explained away with like sleight of hand or little tricks or like potions and poisons and all that sort of thing. And that makes it far more compelling, I think, and just far more intriguing. Yeah, so I think you made the right call there. That is a good idea. So in answer to my question, then, if I can put words in your mouth slightly, you don't really know what can or can't be done, but it's bounded by this idea that it's informed historically and doesn't have this sort of like overpowered supernatural thing to it.
Yes, for the purposes of Nlamo and for the purposes of this story, that's definitely the case. Handwavia, this does take place in the Handwavia system that we came up with a while ago, that I came up with a while ago, and we discussed, which has a lot of planets in a lot of different areas. And, Handwavia itself is an entire planet, and things could be different elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I know that things are different elsewhere. But for the purposes of this story and the purposes of this area, that's what I'm doing here.
Are you making this stuff up as you go along, or have you got loads of things in the back burner?
I know I have a decent idea of the layout of the continent that Nlamo is on.
Okay.
I know a good bit about the planet otherwise. I haven't nailed a lot of things down, but I know a bit, and I have some concepts for the rest of the system.
Okay, but these pieces of prose, they're just done on a monthly basis.
I had for a couple of months now the idea that it would end with the envoy arriving at Zahamo, Tensha's capital, and I think for maybe a month and a half, for about 2 months, I had the idea that it would end with him encountering the chief, the priest and judge, and having an encounter along these lines.
Oh, so is this over? Is this the last we hear from the envoy? No more. I haven't written all of his. No more Barus. This is terrible.
I haven't written all of his reports, though. I mean, there's stuff in between visiting Chapa. There's stuff in between visiting Chapa and visiting Zahamo, and there's stuff before he got to Chapa. So.
Oh, okay. Will we ever hear?
So I might go on.
So, no, you go on.
I might go back and slide stuff in between.
Will we ever hear what happens when he arrives back in his capital or his country?
Which is named
in
this extract.
It's true. Katere? Katere. Will we hear anything from Katere? Will we hear anything from...
It's possible.
I hate the way you do this. It's so annoying.
I haven't decided.
Okay.
Perhaps, he might go back, and he who is as thunder may not be pleased with him.
Well, he did. He's done a good job. What's he done wrong? He's done a lot of scouting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's filling up the job quota, surely.
Yeah.
Maybe he was. Oh, I know. I'm going to start concocting stupid scenarios that in editing I'm going to be like, Edgar, what are you talking about? Like, why are you even saying these things? So I'm just going to cut myself off and just get ahead. You stay ahead while I'm ahead. Is there anything else you'd like to add on that? Because my main points were the Game of Thronesiness, and then is there magic in battle?
No, I think that's about it. Let me just have a quick cast your eye over here.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, sure.
Do you want to tell me about this line here? His heir, Oadan, a sort of nephew to the king. Oadan, a sort of nephew to the king. So what's going on there? His heir is a nephew. Is there a story behind that? It feels like that's not just a stupid bit of trivia. It feels like there's something happening there. Not
really. Tensha doesn't have any children of his own.
Oh, right. Okay, so he's just next in line, basically.
Yeah, and Oadan is his half-sister's child.
Oadan is his half-sister's child.
Yeah, so his half-sister, they share a... Damn, I did work this out before, I think. I think they shared the father, and the son of his half sister is Oedan, and Tensha has kind of raised him and trained him and groomed him towards being his successor.
Does the succession go to next eligible male?
There's no such formal thing about it.
Okay.
Because his kingdom is a sort of a first of a unified Nlamo. I mean, I guess he probably is referring in some way to the traditions of his clan. And I guess that would be... I kind of conceive it as being something like the old Scottish system, where you have to be of the same kinship group. But that's, I mean, that's the fundamental thing. It's more complex than that, and there's a kind of leeway within that.
But it's not just direct oldest, next, whatever.
No.
Okay.
No, it's not just, it goes to your son automatically.
Okay.
Or, and it's not restricted to men.
Okay, so just in the group. Huh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Cool. That's good.
Although he himself took power, he was not eligible for power under those rules.
Tensha was not. Yeah, because you write here about his upbringing.
Yeah.
And he doesn't come from a royal lineage.
Yeah, no, he's from a reasonably comfortable but like humble, modest background.
He worked hard, and he lived the Nlamo dream. You work hard enough, and you make it in life. You know.
You work hard enough, and you can become a brutal military dictator.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, he's not brutal, but you can become, you can conquer the country through violence and diplomacy.
Dictator? Is he a dictator?
Well, in the sense that any monarch, I suppose, whose rule is legitimized through force is. I mean, like, he's not a bad dude by any means. He's a pretty good dude, but, by modern standards, he's a military leader.
It's a benevolent dictatorship.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. I like it. Yeah, cool. Is there any other points in there that are pertinent that I'm not pointing out?
I don't think so. There's a few more things I've hinted at here, and a few seeds I've left for further reveal. So look, we're definitely not done with the story of Nlamo. Whether the envoy will continue to be a player as it develops, I don't know. Ooh. But we're going to hear more from what he previously sent back.
Cool.
To Katere.
I look forward to it. It's good. I'm genuinely actually becoming engaged with this. Like,
good.
I find myself going, I wonder what Bill has written this month, and I'm really looking forward to his piece of prose. It's good.
Oh, good. I almost didn't write this. I was almost going to do something else, and I couldn't figure out what else to do. And I was like, no, I need to, and this is like a really big, because I've been thinking about it for a while. I want to do this right, but I'm pretty happy with how I've done it.
Jesus, Bill, if you don't write something, we don't have a show. Speaking of writing something, I wrote a thing.
You wrote a thing?
I wrote a thing because I was like, no, genuinely, I was really engaged with your stuff, and I was like, I want to have a go at writing a thing. This is going to be in the show notes. Can I just warn everyone straight up front? It's not very good. I'm not a very good writer.
Edgar.
No, it's not very good though. And I love the way I was like, I'll write a small little piece like Bill always does, and then Bill delivers like this big 2-page tome of a thing.
A 2-page tome.
A 2-page tome.
Right. Okay.
Anyhow, I'm not confident in my writing skills. I don't believe I have any writing skills of note, but I decided to write a thing because I thought it was fun. And I sent it to Bill. And do you want me to TLDR this, or do you want me to ask you what you think?
Up to you.
Okay. All right, TLDR for this story. It's in the show notes, and it'll probably be on the subreddit and early release and all that sort of jazz. Is that there is this character who is asking a computing device about stuff that's going on in this world, and specifically around this place called Onikara Prime. And the computer brings up this whole load of information about Onikara Prime, a planet. And then this character listens to what the computer has to say and then tells it to stop and move on to something else. That's essentially the boring TLD orbit. But I tried to do a bill and build something into it. So what did you get from it? Are my intentions clear?
I got a lot out of it.
Oh, good. Do you want to explain?
There was a couple of things I liked. So first of all, you've got a nice framing device here. That this isn't just an info dump. You've got the framing device of computer. What's all this talk about Onikara Prime? That's your opening line. And so that kind of immediately kind of sets up that this is being... It kind of gives you kind of meta information about what the text is.
Yeah.
Which is always interesting to me.
Oh, thanks.
And so then you've given the information, and then at the end it's a computer end, next news story, please. And again, that's like that this is one thing among many, which for me it gives us sort of an idea of like richness, and there's other stuff to be heard here. Which is very very small things, and this is maybe more in the vein of like talking about writing rather than talking about world building specifically. But you can't fully decouple the topics. So.
Agreed.
I'll have a read over this. I'll pick up bits that I liked. Lacocte region of space. Okay, this is what I liked. Originally, Onikara was thought to be very home-like, and the word home there is capitalized. To me, that suggests that it's a setting... Okay, well, actually, there's a couple of things here. But for me, that suggests it's a setting with humans, but without Earth. Or that, for whatever reason, Earth is named home. That would be my first reaction. And then secondary, I was like, wait, who's saying that this is humans? It might not be. Which is, again, very small detail, suggesting a lot of possibilities. And then you talk a bit about the development of the planet and scientific and technical details that are your forte.
Yup. I can't help but make tutorials.
There's nothing wrong with that. And now, Onikara Prime was the first planet visited by human probes. So we are dealing with humans.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we are.
And you give a number of names here. Zan 1, and then what I assume is the year it was visited, 3002.
Yep.
Is that correct? Am I getting that right for your intentions?
That is the year, exactly.
Okay. So we're dealing with a future or perhaps a different chronological system. But anyway. Zan 2 in 3008 and the Makalo Zan lander. 2011. The first 2 data collecting missions were successful. However, contact was lost during the final phase of its mission to land on the Onikaran surface. The data gathered by the Zan flyby mission seems to suggest that Onikara is inhabited, and given the environment, inhabited by silicon-based life forms. That's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. What solvent do you reckon they use?
The sulfur.
The sulfur?
Yeah. So, so to explain.
Giving rise to the brinish seas of sulfuric acid. So sulfuric acid is the kind of the universal solvent of their life system rather than water.
Okay. Before I explain that, this is basically lifted from the Worldbuilding book I mentioned earlier.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't invent this system or this planet or anything, so you just need to, if I get facts wrong, sorry. I'm not necessarily sure it's sulfuric acid per se, but some sort of sulfur based solvent.
Okay.
Because the entire planet is a sulfur planet.
As opposed to basically an oxygen based one. Gotcha.
As opposed to an oxygen, although the atmosphere, like it says, is oxygen.
Yeah.
So that's the solvent. This is, remember, was it Seth earlier?
Yes.
Yeah, this is the thing I mentioned to Seth about his ammonia and methane based thing. This is from that same chapter. So just by complete coincidence, we've kind of been thinking about the same things, which I think is pretty cool.
All right. Cool.
So
So this system you're describing is from the book.
no, the system's mine. All the nomenclature is mine, and the setup's mine. But the chemical analysis of the planet is
Okay.
from the book. Essentially,
The chemical basis is.
it's kind of a roundabout way of describing what a sulfur planet would be like. This whole idea of like the quartz mountains and rubies and sapphires and things like that. These are all like bits of information taken from the book. So for those who don't have the book, I wanted to give them a glimpse into what this book kind of tells. Seth, read this piece of prose.
So when you're saying rubies and sapphires, would they be as common as like granite then here, or would it be more likely to be as common as quartz or coal or whatever?
I don't know how common each of those things are, but the chemical makeup of rubies and sapphires is I think it's corundum is what it's called, is particularly stable in a sulfuric acid environment. So they would be there would be a lot of them. This is why I pointed it out. So yeah,
Gotcha.
there will be a lot. And they don't need to necessarily show up in gem form. But it just sounded more fantastical to be all like, these mountains of quartz littered with rubies and sapphires everywhere. So,
Cool. And finally, the last thing before the computer is interrupted is the fully manned Makalotsan Lander 2 is due to arrive at Onikara within the next 42 days. And so there you're a nice little hook for more to say about this.
Oh, okay. So you've missed the point of it. That's interesting. I ran this test by the captain as well, and she too missed the point of it. So I think this is a failure in my writing.
Okay.
The actual point of it is, okay, the sort of primary point is to talk about how a sulfur planet would exist and all this sort of jazz.
Yeah.
But the secondary point is a commentary on how we consume media.
I was wondering that did occur to me.
Yeah, so for those who haven't read this, the whole idea is that this character...
I didn't think that was the intention.
That was very much intended, because it's been a very crazy week in media, and that was on my mind. I just wanted to talk about how people consume media in a very disposable manner. So for those who haven't read this, basically the character asks his version of like Siri to tell him about Onikara Prime, this sulfur planet that's in the news, because they're going to go visit it. And then the computer starts reading out essentially what is a Wikipedia page, and then just after it says the lander, like humans are going to make contact with this planet that has silicon-based life forms, where another probe like mysteriously went AWOL. Just as the computer says that, the person kind of goes, I'm bored of that. Just next story, please. So it's meant to be a commentary on like the disposable way in which we consume media, with a heavy dose of let's info dump how planets work. So on a writing front, what do you think? It's okay. I don't know.
No, there's nothing I would like hate about this at all. It's well put together. Yeah, and as I said, it evokes all of these things.
Okay, maybe I need to be more confident about my abilities to write. I don't know. We've talked about this on previous podcasts, but I find the idea that people can write just being borderline magic. And every time I try and do it, I'm always horrifically disappointed with the outcome. So I was like, this is really boring, Edgar. But there you go. Anything else to add on that?
Like if I was to be super critical.
Go for it. Yep, no, totally. Lay it on hard, man.
The formatting, or like the order in which the information is presented, I can't imagine exactly what kind of document this is.
Oh.
That would be like, hey, used to be like, if I was to say, hey, tell me about France, and the first paragraph of the answer would be about like Charlemagne. like what kind of document would that be that would like, you know, build on the history that way. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if I'm explaining that well.
Not particularly, because like if you go to a Wikipedia page for France, the first thing it'll say would be something like France is a country located in Europe. And my first line is Onikara Prime is the first and only planet to visit by humans, blah blah blah.
Okay,
blah,
sorry, I meant the second one here, the hot spring planet.
Okay.
Yeah. What kind of information source is this? But that's a very minor thing, in a lot of ways, and it could be that, you know, the culture that this is taking place in values that kind of information, or, you know, really this is the primary thing we know about it is the speculation on its geological history, or this guy's tailored news service prioritizes that kind of information.
I was just about to say that. Like, while you were talking about that, I was like, well, what will produce this? Like a Google-like algorithm. Like, they've searched science, like, 100 times in the past month or whatever, and they've been like, well, they clearly want to see science, so let's push all the science-related bits up to the top of their feed. That could be it.
So that would be my main criticism, is like the order in which the information is received. I can't conceive what this text is that is being presented by the computer, but there are lots of ways to explain that.
What do you think about the idea of the computer presenting like the Wikipedia-like thing, but then the last sentence is in like the present tense?
Yeah, that didn't jar me at all.
Really? Okay, because I was thinking about the idea of like a Wikipedia who like intelligently updates itself to like keep up with what's exactly happening like down to the moment. And I thought maybe that,
as you said, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, go on.
Or as you said, it's, you know, it's an intelligent algorithm that has like learned this human's preferences. So, you know, the first bit is Wikipedia, and then they get into the news, and then maybe further down, less interest priority, they'll talk about like nearby regions or things like that.
Yeah, easy explained away. Although, like, see, this sort of thing bothers me because I'm kind of like, I don't know. It's just writing seems like I'm going to offend writers here, but like not so rigorous thing. Like there is no correct right answer on how to write. Do you know what I mean? Like there's no kind of like 1 + 1 = prose sort of jazz.
Of course there isn't.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. And this one kind of bothers me. And I'm always kind of like, there is no right answer here. So what am I doing and how and all that sort of jazz? But I
don't think anyone's going to be offended by that.
Well, writers might.
And also,
be.
everyone's all like, they're all post-structuralists now, and nothing actually means anything, so it's fine.
They're all post-structuralists.
Literary theory stuff.
Oh.
I don't know. I'm in over my head if I even by making that joke, so I'm not going to try and like explain it.
Oh, he pulled an Edgar. He got out, but he knew he was heading down the wrong road. Just pull out, turn, hard left. Okay, well, I'm glad that you didn't think that was a disaster. I don't like it, obviously, because everything I write I don't like. But it was an interesting endeavor, and it makes me appreciate what you do every month. It's very cool.
Yeah, thank you very much.
We'll put it in the show notes, both stories, so people can go check it out.
Yeah,
and
we'll be linking them on the subreddit before we launch the episode anyway. So
yep. And anyone who, if you find any of the information in my story particularly interesting, seriously go and pick up that world building book, A Writer's Guide to Constructing Star Systems. It's just a really good book. I was in Indonesia, Bill.
Pretty cool. How was it?
It was, on paper, it was probably the worst holiday ever.
Okay.
But in reality, it was like incredibly amazing. Like it was so good. Like on paper, it rained the entire time. The flights over were horrific. We stopped in Kuala Lumpur, which I've now come to know as the world's worst airport. Just the getting there and back, and then the weather was just terrible. But that's on paper. In practice, it was amazing. Like it's just paradise down there. Like I've never experienced almost like cartoon level paradise before. It's crazy.
Edgar.
Yeah.
Did you find yourself?
I didn't find myself. Do you know what? The captain was insistent, right? That we have to take pictures of me in front of various finding myself implements just to send to you. Like, there was like...
I am offended that you did not do that.
I had no time for such nonsense. Like, there was things like you could buy little namaste signs, and she was like, can we buy a sign? And then can you hold it? And we said it to Bill. I was like, I'm not buying a namaste sign. This is ridiculous. No, I didn't find myself. But I had a great time. It was really cool. I have some world building ideas sort of from Indonesia that I thought I'd just tell you about, as opposed to just going on about like I ate this food or whatever. I'm going to try and tie this into world building. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so I'll start with probably the smallest one first. Yeah, interesting naming convention idea that comes from Bali.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has the same names, sort of. There's like a list of 4 sets of names to choose from, and they are the only names available, which is fascinating.
As in given names, personal names.
Given names, exactly. So it's the equivalent of like, in Bali, I don't know the exact names though, but in Bali, like the firstborn gets to choose from the list, or the parents choose from a list of firstborn names. The secondborn, another list, thirdborn, another list, fourthborn, another list, and then it just loops.
Huh.
Yeah, which is really interesting. So we met tons of Wyans, for example, which is one of the names that are for firstborn. So you can identify where you fall in the family, more or less, from the naming convention. Now, I don't claim to speak for Balinese culture. I get the impression that like this has expanded a bit with globalization and stuff, and people choose names outside of this. But at one time, this was a strong practice. I think that's pretty cool. And the way of differentiating between the firstborn and the fifthborn is just to say another afterwards or again. So it'd be like Edgar, firstborn, and Edgar, another, fifthborn, and that's just brilliant. And then they also have this thing where they don't really have second names either, but they kind of have qualities. So you'd have like Edgar the Thin is a common thing, or like Fat Edgar, or Smart Edgar. These are common ways of identifying, and the whole idea of like a second name doesn't seem to be all that prominent. Like people don't really seem to care, or seem to care at one time. Again, I don't know exactly what the culture is at the moment, which is another fascinating thing. And then there's this idea of there's a caste thing going on a little bit as well. So there's like naming based on caste, which is another level of kind of complexity on top of it. So I thought that's a really fascinating idea that I just thought I would share with you and the listeners.
That is pretty cool.
It's very cool.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Of course.
So there's a list of possible names for firstborns.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So let's say Edgar is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then it loops around when you get to the fifth child. But like, would you say, I presume you wouldn't call them Edgar the second time. So you wouldn't call them Edgar again. You'd call them, say, Bill again. Is that right? Or do you have to use the same first name?
No, you don't have to. Again, I can't speak for all Balinese people. I get the impression you don't have to. Wikipedia lists the example of Wayan and then Wayan Balik, which literally means Wayan another. So I get the impression that if people chose to have 2 Wayans, they would differentiate like that.
Okay.
I don't know. I honestly don't know. The thing I do know is that there's a set of names, and they are base 4.
Are they gendered?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's very tenuous. I'm open to being wrong on that, but I don't think they're gendered. Tell me if I'm wrong in the subreddit, because I'll correct it next show, but off the top of my head, I don't think so. And anyways, for world building, don't make them gendered. That's even more interesting, I think. So yeah, just a little naming thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is there's this practice of putting out these things called kanang sari, probably pronounced completely wrong, but like these little offerings that people put in front of their like houses and workplaces and I'm assuming this is an offering to a god of some description, and to get blessings from them. This I'm going to steal and put in Takar, because remember way back when we talked about Takar being based on Kiumbanda?
Yeah.
And the whole idea in Kiumbanda, like in the rituals, people would bring like bottles of beer and cigars and these like tokens to the gods.
Yeah.
This is a cool little thing I've experienced, and I'm going to put in my world building, that people during, like, say, the injection of X or whatever, as a sort of relic from before, people would bring these little offerings in these like wonderfully crafted little sort of trinkets is the wrong word, little items. I'll leave links in the show notes to pictures, and just seeing this like in real life kind of really set story ideas in my head. And there's a whole, like, these little offerings have like, there's rules to how they're laid out, like certain flowers point in certain directions, like certain compass directions, and different materials symbolize different things to different gods, and it's like a fascinating thing. And then tourists just trampled them on the street, which is just like, come on lads, what are you doing? But that's something I'm going to take for my own world building. That's point 2, and the final one, the big one, is I'm going to tell you a story, Bill, about a mine in a volcano.
A mine in a volcano.
I was in a mine in a volcano.
Presumably there was a supervillain somewhere nearby.
No, but when you're world building, you put your own supervillain there.
Okay.
So there is. This got me thinking about like how, you know, why dwarves are miners, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone ever actually looks at what it is to be a miner, and the cultural context of being a mining culture, for example. It's just kind of like dwarves mine and that's it.
I have some points to bring up about that actually when you're finished.
Do you want to drop them in now?
Nope.
No.
It's a long thing.
It's a long thing. Okay, cool. So anyhow, I climbed a volcano, Ijen volcano on the island of Java.
That is so immensely dope.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. We climbed into the crater, like the active volcano crater, and we got to see like the miners at work. And these miners work around blue fire. Like, I kid you not.
Wait, it's an active mine.
It's an active mine in an active volcano.
What the hell?
Well, no, what do you mean, where's the what the hell coming from? Like, how is this even allowed to be a thing, yeah?
That's mental. That's so cool.
Okay, so, yeah, it is. It's really cool. Well, I was conflicted about how
it sounds like it's terrible from like a labor point of view.
Yeah, it's terrible from labor, and it's also kind of terrible that like all the white people, myself included, just show up there and kind of view miners working in horrendous conditions as
I have reservations about that, undoubtedly.
Yeah, so like I realize I'm a hypocrite here because I engaged in that, but I was painfully aware of just the different worlds that were going on right next to one another, and that was an interesting dynamic to experience.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're getting derailed. Point being, these miners. The volcano is an active volcano, and in one particular vent, it oozes this blue fire, right? And this is because there is sulfur bubbling up from under the surface. And what the miners do is they mine this sulfur from inside the crater and then haul it to the nearest town and sell it. And that's how they make a living. For this pleasure, they have to walk 3 kilometers from the town to the mountain, up the mountain, down like a 60-degree incline into the crater, mine a load of sulfur without any protection, and climb back up the 60-degree thing, down the mountain, and another 3 kilometers to where they sell the thing, and they'll make this trip about twice a day. And for their entire day's haul, I think they make something like is it $13 and that's it.
Jesus.
Yeah, but that's considered quite good in the region. And like, there's this cool idea of like their conditions are obviously horrendous, but we talked to some of them, like they talk to us and things like that, and I read up about them. They seem quite happy in the sense that like this affords them a relatively decent lifestyle, and above that a kind of cultural standing, not a cultural, a sort of a elevated societal standing in their towns or whatever. So there's this weird dynamic going on that like people will put themselves through this because of what money and status and things, and that's really weird. And there's also like this these myths that have sprung up amongst the miners that like if you smoke while inside the crater, it protects you from the sulfur cloud because you're inhaling the cigarette smoke and not the sulfur. And like this whole like subset of these like rituals and things that they do, and it's just really fascinating to see. And I realize I can't convey this very well on a podcast, but I may in fact write another story for one of the podcasts based around this, because I think it's just fascinating. Once you've seen it in real life, it's really affecting to see this happen. And again, I just want to highlight the hypocrisy that I was like the white Westerner who showed up and paid many multiples of what they make per day just for the pleasure of viewing it as a tour.
Yeah.
And
that's kind of uncomfortable, isn't it?
It's an uncomfortable feeling. And if I had greater convictions, I would not have gone. But man, was it beautiful though. Like it was like a once in a lifetime opportunity. And never mind the mining, just to get on the mountain and watch, because you do it at night. You climb the mountain at night. And you climb into the volcano in pitch darkness. Like it's
that's unsafe.
It's not safe, and sometimes it's quite scary. But then you climb back out and you walk along the rim of the volcano, and you get to watch the sunrise over the sea onto Java, and it's just like it's incredible. Like it's absolutely stunning. So
that sounds class.
Yeah, it was amazing. Part of me feels really bad that I was that person, but the other part of me is kind of like I've experienced something I will remember for the rest of my life. Funny story. Oh, not funny story, horrific story. The entire way down the climb into the volcano, we were the cloud of like sulfur gas was blowing the opposite way from us, and everything was kind of fine. Like we were told to put on gas masks. We were given gas masks. The locals like either didn't want them or weren't given them, and that was another kind of like sort of like what's going on here, lads. But we were fine, and then like we didn't even need to really wear the gas masks. But then the wind turned, and this massive cloud of like suffocating sulfur just completely envelops everyone in the crater. And like that was like there was a moment there, it's kind of like I'm not gonna make it. I'm done. This is it. I'm going to have to...
This is how I die.
This is how I die. Like, no joke. It got up in the gas mask, and it was, like, very, very difficult to breathe. And, like, I was heaving, and the smell, it just... Oh, God. And the miners, totally cool with it. They just sitting there. There's one guy, I said to the captain, we need to go. We need to just... The advice is stay put and let the cloud just do its thing. I was like, we need to move right now. This is too hard to breathe. And then we moved, and there's this miner sitting on a rock there, just chilling with a cigarette, like a total like badass. And it's like, and there's me like kind of coughing up my lungs, like it's crazy. So yeah, there's an interesting mining story to be had of that, and there's an interesting way of looking at mining cultures and communities in a broader context that rarely, I think, makes its way into our fiction. It's just dwarves mine, everyone's there swinging pickaxes, it's all lovely, but it's more nuance to it, and it's something I am going to look at in the future. You had a thing to say.
Well, first of all, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Like, mining is a serious engineering undertaking. It's a big deal, and it's expensive and difficult. But my issue with dwarves regarding mining and how dwarves are always miners in things. So you know they what do? They dig tunnels, right?
Yeah.
And tunnels need to be shored up. You need like support within these tunnels in most cases, as I understand, if you're building big things. You know, you need to have structures and supports within that. Certainly when you're digging through soil, maybe less so in rock. And then, what are they digging for?
Like precious stones.
Precious stones and things. They also need metal, and they're digging for metal. Right?
Right, yeah. Where are you going here now?
Okay, and dwarves live underground, right? And it's an entirely, subterranean thing.
Yes.
What do they shore up their tunnels with? What do they use to, process and refine the ores that they get?
Wait, but hang on. How is this any different from someone who doesn't live underground?
Because if you don't live underground, you get access to trees.
Oh, and
dwarves must use huge amounts of wood. And as such, dwarves, as they're portrayed in fiction, must have, a lot of contact with the surface world in order to get enough lumber to do what they do. And I've never seen anyone bring that up. It takes huge amounts of wood to turn a small amount of ore into iron.
That's a fair point. Are dwarves classically depicted as just being entirely subterranean? As they never, ever come out of their caves?
I mean, Tolkien dwarves, that's a 60-year-old concept, so, it's probably too early to say, but I think that's how it exists in a lot of kind of popular imagination, yeah. And I don't think Tolkien dwarves were, shown as having a lot of trade with the surface in order to get the wood to do what they do. And in a lot of other kind of Tolkien-derived works, dwarves, yeah, they live underground. That's where they do their thing. But you need a lot of... I suppose they could use coal for some of what they would use wood for, but that's a whole other thing. And coal is quite difficult to mine. It's in really, short, narrow seams. I don't know. It's a thing I think would be worth looking into for some world builders.
Well, that's
a subterranean culture would need to have a lot of contact with the surface for a lot of stuff.
It seems like a volcano would be the solution to this, wouldn't it? That naturally supplies your furnaces.
How do you work it though? Because you can't go anywhere near lava. How do you approach it? You can't stand next to lava.
Well, these miners were standing next to blue fire.
Yeah, but that's different to lava.
Yeah, but you don't necessarily need lava. Surely if you have lava, then you're in a active I'm about to explode volcano. But if you have fiery things, it would just be I don't know what the word is, but a semi-dormant volcano or whatever, but it would just have all the heat necessary to smelt things.
That's interesting. I wonder, yeah, would a natural sulfur fire have the heat necessary to work metals? Not all fire is the same. Fire is different materials burn at different temperatures. But blue fire, I guess it could be a number of different things. But I know that a gas fire is blue colored, and that's way hotter than a wood fire. So I don't know what it would be from sulfur or whatever it is that is being burned there.
And I suppose as well, think about mining societies, wherever, this idea that, any mining that goes on in the fictional world happens like dwarves mine. There's many, many different types of mine. I don't remember reading about a culture that only does, say, open mining and things like that. It's always dwarven style mining. So just something to bear in mind.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
There's obviously pros and cons of different things and with certain different creatures. I thought when you said about how do they prop up their mines, I immediately thought, wait a minute, dwarves shouldn't mine internally, they should mine externally. That makes so much more sense. But then you kept talking and my idea just went out. So,
no, it's also a point though.
But yeah, so that was my trip to Aegean Volcano. Just a slight plug. I don't really like doing this unless it's in a video. But I've started an Instagram. Nothing to do with Artifexian at all. Just Edgar Grunwald Instagram. That's how you find me. I want to take more pictures. I want to be a better photographer. And I figure if I tell people that I have this Instagram and people, if they're so inclined, follow me, there'll be more an onus on me to actually do that. So I have a couple of pictures up there from Indonesia. So if anyone wants to follow, please do, and hopefully it'll inspire me to take more pictures. There'll be definitely some pictures of the lunar eclipse, the solar eclipse on it as well.
Oh, cool, yeah. Because that's coming up soon, isn't it?
That is coming up soon. I am leaving tomorrow.
All right.
For it, yeah. I am leaving I have to leave the house in 8 hours.
Oh, okay.
And I have not yet packed.
Good stuff.
Disaster. But yeah, so if anyone wants to follow me on Instagram, I'll leave links. Sorry, it's a bit of a plug. I'm sorry, but I kind of want some public pressure to actually make stuff on this.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's my trip in Indonesia. That is all I have for Green Room. Is there anything going on in your life?
I had a couple more things to say about mining, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. I always do. I always cut you off before the topic is actually finished. I'm sorry.
Okay, but now I can't exactly remember them. Hold on. You've distracted me. No, it's gone. It's gone. It might come back to me some other time. Is there anything going on in my life? There is not. No. I'm just kind of, as I said, it's been very cold here recently. I don't know why. It shouldn't be this cold in August. I've been gigging, and I did a little bit of work on Janspar recently, actually.
Ooh, please tell.
Yeah. So I've got more I've got a more complete idea of the global geography.
Cool, very cool.
And I've changed a few things. Now I haven't shared a lot of this, so this may not be interesting to anyone, but I've changed a few things about the layout, and I've redone all of the biomes and ocean currents and things.
Oh, how come?
So I've got because I found that a few things that I needed to change, a few things that I wasn't fully happy with how I'd done the last time. So I've made it slightly better, and also I uploaded what sketches I put what sketches I had on my computer and compared them to real world. The real world that we actually have. And I had a huge desert that was like the size of the Indian Ocean, and I was like, that's a bit much actually. So I just kind of changed. I made some of the land masses slightly smaller to make them a little bit more manageable. So it's a little bit more in line with how I'd like it to be.
Yeah, but hold on. Is the planet bigger than Earth? Because if it is, then bigger deserts are fine.
It's not bigger than Earth.
It's not okay. It's not big. That's a problem there, Bill. An Indian Ocean-sized desert.
Yeah, I was like, oh wait, like I when I had done it, I had kind of, well, no, it wasn't, maybe not quite the size of that, but it was certainly like something approaching that kind of scale. It was like a massive desert, which is kind of like too big to actually be that interesting to me. So I changed around some stuff like that to give me more options to use things and to do stuff with. So I'm actually pretty happy with how it is now. I came up with a kind of a list of my various disparate world building ideas that I haven't consolidated yet. So I might work on that.
Hang on. So different settings, or just like ideas for little biomes?
Oh no,
like planets,
different settings and things. Yeah, so okay. Like new settings. I've got a list of 4 here. One of them I've actually mentioned to you before, which is just I looked at cool stuff that existed in Earth's history, geologically speaking, and I'm going to put all of those together and not worry that much about whether they happened at the same time.
So like Pangea with dinosaurs and Apple products.
No. That sounds terrible. Well, obviously, I mean, like, Pangea kind of contradicts a lot of other things, but say in the Cretaceous period? Is it Cretaceous period? Anyway, one of the dinosaur periods.
Who knows?
Let's say Cretaceous. There was like a huge sea running down the middle of North America. So like North America was 2 completely separate land masses. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. That's really cool. And I like that idea. And that got me thinking about it. And I was like, what other cool stuff like that, like big stuff, was there in history. Doggerland is pretty cool. I've always thought Doggerland was kind of interesting.
What's this? What's Doggerland?
Europe, when the sea levels were lower, so before, like during the Ice Age, before the glaciers melted, the sea level was way lower, and you could walk from Ireland into what is now mainland Europe. It was all one landmass, and it's known as Doggerland. That like extension that is now the Great Britain and Ireland. So that's pretty cool that you could do that, and also like the Baltic Sea was cut off from the Atlantic Ocean because the sea level was lower. Denmark connected directly to Sweden. The Bering Land Bridge is another. So, like you could walk from Siberia to Alaska. So there's a bunch of different stuff like that. Like the Mediterranean used to be really, really dry. There was a couple of very, very low hyper salinated lakes in it. Like the Nile drained into like a hyper salinated low sea, which was cut off from the Atlantic. So I've just like stuck all of those together. I'm going to keep looking for more, just to kind of make it kind of like our world, but different enough to be exciting.
Okay, so explicitly it is our world. It's not just these ideas taken and transported and placed on other land masses that don't look like Earth at all. You're doing like a weird alternate Earth,
anachronistic geology of Earth.
Okay, well that's cool. That's pretty interesting.
I mean, it's in a lot of ways it's kind of silly that I've got something from the Cretaceous period existing alongside something that was only like 10,000 years ago, but I don't care. It's for fun.
Yeah, and if it's interesting, it's fine. Like,
yeah,
and if you get joy out of it, it's all good.
If the listeners are interested, I might work on a bit on that for next episode.
Oh, cool! I'm interested.
Okay. Well, I might do that. Then I'll see what the response is from people if they'd like to see that, and I'll upload it, and they can see what of the changes they can see.
Cool.
What features they can identify. But otherwise,
cool.
No,
That sounds
I've
really
got
cool.
very little new happening in my life.
Okay, well, I'm out of stuff to talk about, and the captain just texted me and was like, "Can I come back home now?"
Yeah, I should probably.
So
let her home.
maybe we should wrap it up.
Let's leave it there. Have a fabulous time in the States.
Will do. Hopefully, anyways. Hopefully it all goes to plan. Yep, thanks, man. There'll be pictures there, and I'll talk about it. Don't worry.
I will check your Instagram.
Hey. What was I going to say? Just a quick thing to the listeners. The last 2 or 3 episodes have been pretty short, mainly because I'm in Korea at the moment and I have to kick the captain out to do these things, and I don't want to kick her out of her own home for hours on end. This should be the last of the fairly short episodes, because then the next time we record, we will both be in Ireland. So we can resume our normal recording schedule. So if anyone is worried that things are really short and just feels weird or something, normality will resume hopefully next month.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, Bill, it was a pleasure as always talking to you, sir.
A pleasure as always.
And I will see you next time.
Talk to you soon, man. Edgar out.
Edgar out.